When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
All right, we've heard all the takes. Yesterday, we heard Tom Mulcair's take on this program. This morning, you heard Pierre Poilievre's take on this program about the GST holiday. What do people who know a thing or two about economics think about the plan? Let's head over to Moshe Lander, Senior Lecturer in Economics at Concordia University. Moshe, welcome back to the show.
Good morning.
This is the question I have. There's a lot of talk about a GST holiday on so many items, right? Video games, booze, and of course, stuff you buy at the grocery store. Is this good economic policy?
Yes and no. I know
right on the fence, Moshe, right on the fence.
That's exactly it. So the problem with a sales tax in general is it's a regressive tax. So what that means is that the lower income people are exposed to this tax more than higher income people. And that's because lower income people need to spend a greater portion of their income than higher income people do, which means that if they're spending more of their income, they're also paying more of this GST than higher income people. And so we usually like to think that a progressive tax system is fair. So a regressive tax system would be unfair. And that's why we usually have exemptions on things like milk and other necessities to effectively avoid punishing low-income people for being low-income. It's probably not something they chose to do. So the idea then of giving some relief to lower-income Canadians from this tax isn't a bad idea. It's just which goods are you choosing? And video games, I don't know necessarily is the best thing to be targeting. And so that's why you get a yes or no answer. The concept is okay. It's the choice of what you're exempting that is a problem. And of course, because it's only temporary, means that at some point somebody's got to come back and say, all right, back to business as usual. Mm-hmm. And is somebody really going to do that?
And is the juice worth the squeeze? You know, I spoke to one restaurateur in the 9 o'clock hour, and they talked about the hassle. This will be a hassle to program and then deprogram and that kind of thing. Retailers must go through the same thing. What about that aspect of this? When you think about its effect on the economy, this is a bureaucratic thing that businesses now have to deal with as well.
It is, and that could be a problem. So if I'm a business, there are ways that I can get around having to reprogram everything as long as I'm really good with my accounting techniques, which is don't change the final price at all. Just change the amount that actually goes into my pocket and the amount that goes into the government's coffers. So let's say, for example, that I'm at Dollarama and I sell a chocolate bar for $1. In Quebec, then after tax, that would be $1.15. If now, because of this tax relief, it's only going to come to $1.10 because the 5% GST has been removed from it, maybe what I say is, I'm not prepared to change my prices on everything, so I'm just going to leave everything at $1.15, and I'm going to pocket the full $1.15 for myself. I don't have to remit anything other than 10 cents to the provincial government. So consumers might not even see necessarily the benefit, depending on how that machine is programmed from the outset.
Moshe, this was proposed last week. The NDP, they went a little bit further, obviously, something that would be permanent when it comes to reducing or taking away the GST. But they had this proposal. Following week, the Liberals, take this idea, modify it a bit, and say this is going to be our policy. Could I ask you, how do you describe this policy? Is it a Liberal policy? I mean, clearly, I don't know if it's a Conservative policy. Maybe it is because Erin O'Toole proposed it in 2021. How do you describe an initiative, a policy idea like this, like removing the GST?
The GST sales taxes in general, while they are regressive, they're also a very good source of income for governments, and they're a necessary source of income for governments because when governments pass up on that opportunity for revenue, they have to find it somewhere else or they have to cut services accordingly. So, I think the word I would use is that it's opportunistic, that the Liberals are running scared. They're trying to find something. They watched what happened south of the border and saw the Democrats, which should have been able to slam dunk that election, instead suffer a humiliating loss. And in part it was because at the end of the day, they were held responsible for what went on in the economy over the last 4 years. And rather than say, hey, that's the cleanup from COVID, that's the way things go, I think the Liberals realize they're going to take one on the chin in a few months for being in charge during the COVID cleanup. And I don't think that anybody's going to want to listen to them try and explain how they saved the economy from a much worse fate. So at this point, then, if people are concerned about cost of living and affordability issues, then here you go. And here's something for the masses that will hopefully pay off in 10 months' time. And that's why it's only a short-term tool, is they realize this is not a good strategy in the long run to start suspending sales taxes.
With Moshe Lander from Concordia University. Moshe, I'm trying to read in between the lines on this one. And what I mean by that is, in some provinces, this is far more than 5%, right? If it impacts the HST in other provinces that have the harmonized sales tax, we're talking 13 or 15% in some provinces, right? And, I've heard someone opine that this could be because the government has seen some bad economic data, right? That retail sales, things aren't going in the right direction, and they're trying to spur people buying stuff. Do you think there could be any bit of truth to that? As you look in between the lines, try and figure out why the government did this, could there be just bad economic news on the horizon?
There could be. I mean, there very likely is. We've now got a little bit of instability coming from the U.S. We've got a very weak Canadian dollar, which is generally good for exports, but it can also be a source of inflation. And people have clearly suffered where their standard of living has fallen over the last decade. So if the government is seeing that, yes, there is a risk of a recession or that there's a risk of an economic slowdown or growth isn't going to be as strong, they do have other levers to reach out to. Other than this, I think what you're going to find is that lower income people are already spending close to the maximum amount they can. So giving them a bit of tax relief might allow them to buy a greater quantity of goods, but it's not going to change their overall spending because they're already at their limit. Higher income Canadians might be incentivized at the margin to spend a little bit more, but not enough that you're going to see economic data now say, hey, Canada's growing robustly. So I don't know that this is necessarily the means to achieve it if that's what the government's trying to do.
Moshe, let me ask you about the $250 check that's promised for next year, for next spring. It sounds like that's a policy that will be inflationary at the end of the day if 18 million plus Canadians get $250 in one shot. What about that? All of these moves, do they not just then fuel inflation? Yeah.
And that was the risk when we've seen it locally. The premier here was basically dangling it as an incentive for people to vote for him during the last election, that if we win a majority, we'll hand everybody $400 or $500 each. And so, it does lead to inflation. It's not the Bank of Canada's responsibility, given that interest rates have now come down to something a little more normal, and that inflation is something a little more normal. Even if it adds a couple of tenths of a percentage point, we're not necessarily looking at it going back up to 8%. So the government wouldn't have acted without consulting with the Bank of Canada. Bank of Canada doesn't have to approve their policies, but they can tell them this is what it's going to do to inflation or this is what it's going to do to the general economy. And then the government can still do whatever it wants. But I'm sure that they factor that in, that whatever amount of inflation it's adding, 18 million people receiving $250 checks is going to be a rounding error in the grand scheme of things in the economy. So I don't know how much that's really going to push the number. And if the Bank of Canada is already worried about inflation sliding below 2%, hey, so this just returns it to 2.
Moshe Lander, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. You have a great weekend.
Anytime. Thank you.
Moshe Lander is a senior lecturer in economics at Concordia University.